Imagine a pharaoh who dared to erase the gods of Egypt, a man who defied millennia of religious tradition and paid for it by having his very existence erased, statues destroyed, names scraped from stone walls, temples sealed as if they hid a contagion. Akhenaten was not simply forgotten. He was hunted by history. But why? What did this pharaoh see or discover? That after his death, Egypt tried to pretend he had never existed. What if Akhenaten was not merely a heretic, but the guardian of a forbidden secret? To understand the enigma of Akhenaten, we must return to the height of ancient Egypt. Around 1350 BCE, during the powerful 18th dynasty. This was an era of immense wealth, territorial expansion, and absolute religious authority. The gods were many: Amen, Ra, Isis, Osiris, Horus, each with colossal temples, influential priesthoods, and real political power. The pharaoh was not merely a ruler. He was the living bridge between gods and men, and at the center of this system stood Amen, the invisible god, lord of the wind, whose priests had grown so powerful they rivaled the pharaoh himself. It is within this rigidly structured world that Amenhotep IV was born, an apparently ordinary prince, destined to rule according to ancient traditions. But something changed. Just a few years after ascending the throne, Amenhotep IV did something no pharaoh before him had ever dared to imagine. He abandoned his own name and was reborn as Akhenaten, he who is beneficial to Aten. That moment marked the beginning of one of the greatest religious ruptures in human history. Akhenaten did not merely introduce a new god, he destroyed all the others. Aten had no human form, no body, no face, no elaborate mythology. He was represented only as a solar disk, whose rays ended in hands. But the most disturbing detail was not the image. It was the exclusivity. Akhenaten decreed that Aten was the only true god. All other cults were outlawed, temples were closed, priests were expelled, and the name of Amen, the most powerful god of all, was systematically erased from inscriptions and monuments. It was a silent war against the Egyptian pantheon itself. And, as if that were not enough, Akhenaten abandoned Thebes, the sacred capital, and built an entirely new city in a deserted, isolated location. Its name was Akhenaten, the horizon of Aten, a city without a past, without ancient temples, without memories. There, Akhenaten isolated himself with his family, including the enigmatic Nefertiti, and ruled as an absolute prophet. But something felt inhuman. The depictions of Akhenaten shocked even Egyptian standards. He was portrayed with an elongated skull, wide hips, a protruding belly, a narrow face, and deep-set eyes. Some historians suggest a genetic disorder. Others claim it was religious symbolism. But there are those who see something far more unsettling. Why would a pharaoh allow himself to be depicted as strange, almost grotesque, in a culture obsessed with divine perfection? And why do only he and his family share these features? In the reliefs of Akhenaten, Akhenaten does not behave like a traditional god-king. He appears submissive to Aten, almost like an intermediary, not a ruler, but a messenger. And here arises the question that still echoes today. Did Akhenaten truly create a new religion, or did he merely reveal something that already existed? Texts from the so-called hymn to Aten describe the god as a universal, invisible entity, one that sees all, sustains life, and rules the world alone. Descriptions disturbingly similar to concepts that would only emerge thousands of years later. Monotheism, a single god, light as the creative principle. Some scholars argue this idea was far too advanced for its time. Others believe Akhenaten invented nothing. He only discovered it, but discovered what some theories suggest. Akhenaten gained access to forbidden knowledge, perhaps ancient texts predating even dynastic Egypt. Others claim he experienced visions, recurring dreams, mystical encounters tied to the sun, the light, and the silence of the desert. And then there is the darkest theory of all, that Akhenaten was not speaking to a god, but to something that presented itself as one. During his reign, Egypt's diplomatic network collapsed. Territories were lost. Famines spread. Desperate letters from allies begging for help were ignored. Akhenaten seemed detached from the real world, obsessed only with Aten. And then, as abruptly as he appeared, Akhenaten vanished. His death is shrouded in silence. There is no confirmed tomb, no mummy conclusively identified as his. What came next was even more disturbing. His successor, possibly Tutankhamun, quickly restored the old gods. Akhenaten was abandoned. The temples of Aten were destroyed, and Akhenaten, his name was erased from king lists. His statues smashed, his reliefs hammered out. To Egypt, Akhenaten became the forbidden pharaoh, not a common tyrant, but someone whose legacy had to be completely annihilated, as if his very memory was dangerous. When Akhenaten died, Egypt did not simply change course. It entered containment mode. There was no national mourning, no grand funerary monuments, no glorification. There was erasure. Records suggest that shortly after his death, a silent order spread across the kingdom. Akhenaten was never to be remembered. But why such urgency? This is where we enter the most unsettling territory of Egyptology. One theory suggests that Akhenaten broke an ancient pact, an agreement between the pharaohs and the old gods. By declaring Aten the only true deity, he disrupted the spiritual balance believed to sustain Egypt itself. Another theory goes even further. According to fragmented texts and unofficial interpretations, Akhenaten did not merely worship Aten. He claimed to receive direct instructions. Aten did not speak through priests, did not use oracles, did not appear in collective dreams. Aten spoke only to Akhenaten. That transformed the pharaoh into something new and dangerous, an exclusive intermediary between an absolute entity and all of humanity. And what if Akhenaten discovered that the Egyptian gods were not eternal? What if Aten was something older, greater, and incompatible with the traditional pantheon? Some see disturbing parallels between Aten and descriptions of cosmic entities, a force without form, without face, without mythology, only light, energy, and total dominion. a presence that does not demand worship, but obedience. If this were true, Akhenaten would not have been a heretic. He would have been a revealer, and revelations are sometimes more dangerous than lies. The destruction of Akhenaten was meticulous. Homes were dismantled, temples buried, reliefs mutilated, as if Egypt were trying to bury something along with the pharaoh, and perhaps it succeeded. But not everything vanished. The hymn to Aten survived, and when read today, it sounds disturbingly modern, almost out of place in time, as if someone had written about a concept the world was not yet ready to understand. Some researchers go even further, suggesting that core ideas of Hebrew monotheism, which would emerge centuries later, may have been directly or indirectly influenced by Akhenaten's radical experiment. Did Moses live in Egypt during or shortly after this period? There is no definitive proof, but there are too many coincidences to ignore. And that brings us to the final question. Akhenaten ruled for less than 2 decades, but his impact has echoed for more than 3,000 years. He tried to change how humanity understood the divine. He tried to replace many gods with one. He tried to centralize faith, truth, light, and he failed. Or perhaps he succeeded too well, because Egypt did not react like a civilization that defeated a common enemy. It reacted like one that survived something that must never be repeated. To this day, we do not know where Akhenaten's body lies. His tomb remains undiscovered, his final fate unknown. Some believe he died in disgrace, others that he was assassinated. And some say his body was never found because it was never meant to be found. Perhaps Akhenaten was just a man. Or perhaps he was the first to face a truth the ancient world could not endure. A pharaoh who dared to look directly at the sun and left Egypt blinded by fear. Now I want to hear from you. Was Akhenaten a mad heretic, a visionary far ahead of his time, or someone who came into contact with something that should not exist? If you believe history hides dangerous truths, leave a like. If you think the past still holds secrets that could change everything, subscribe to Urban Secret and write in the comments, did Akhenaten discover God or something beyond him? Because here we don't just tell stories. We uncover what was buried. Until the next Urban Secret.